Long before nations and borders existed, a great civilization quietly flourished along the banks of a river that would shape history. The Indus, located in what is now Pakistan and northwest India. This land was home to one of humanity's earliest urban experiments, the Indus River and its tributaries, including the ancient Harappa, brought life to a vast and varied landscape. These were not just simple river banks. The region stretched from misty Himalayan foothills to wind-swept deserts, from fertile floodplains to the edges of the Arabian Sea. It was a geography of extremes, and it demanded innovation. In the north, snowmelt from the mountains fed rich, alluvial soil, ideal for early agriculture. In the south, dry zones tested the resilience of its people. Along the coast, ancient mariners set out on early voyages, connecting this civilization to distant cultures. The people of the Indus chose their settlements wisely. They built near rivers for water, near forests for resources, and near trade routes for connection. Nature wasn't just a backdrop, it was a partner in their survival and growth. Here, in the cradle of contrasting environments, a civilization would rise that mastered the land, not by conquering it, but by living in harmony with it. This is the geographic heartbeat of the Indus Valley Civilization, where nature's diversity became humanity's opportunity. In the embrace of these rich and varied lands, human innovation began to take root. By around 3300 BCE, this landscape gave rise to more than just scattered villages. It became the cradle of a full-fledged civilization, known today as the Indus Valley Civilization. It stood among the earliest of the Bronze Age, flourishing alongside the likes of Mesopotamia and Egypt. But this civilization didn't appear overnight. Its roots stretched back to farming communities like Mehrgarh, one of the oldest agricultural settlements in South Asia. Here, nearly 1,000 years before the rise of cities, people were already domesticating animals, storing grain, and crafting tools from stone and copper. Slowly, over generations, these early villages grew in size, complexity, and ambition. Mud huts gave way to brick dwellings, communal wells and granaries emerged. With each innovation, the seeds of urban life took deeper hold. The fertile floodplains and dependable monsoons supported surplus farming, freeing some people to become artisans, builders, and traders. Villages began to specialize and to connect, forming a network that laid the foundation for vast urban centers. By the middle of the 3rd millennium BCE, the transformation was complete. Rural life had evolved into organized city-states, the first signs of a sophisticated civilization taking shape across the valley. From the quiet rhythm of farming in Mehrgarh to the early bustle of city life, the people of the Indus Valley were writing a new chapter in human history, one where time, land, and innovation worked in harmony. As these early settlements took shape, the land itself became their greatest ally. The Indus Valley was more than just fertile, it was resource-rich. With access to dependable rivers, the people tapped into a steady supply of fresh water. Seasonal floods deposited nutrient-rich silt, creating farmland that could sustain large populations year after year. Beneath the surface, clay deposits were plentiful, ideal for molding bricks, pottery, and everyday tools. This seemingly simple material would become the building block of Indus cities, shaping homes, streets, and even complex drainage systems. To the west, the hills and mountains offered something even more valuable: raw materials for industry, copper, veins, and semi-precious stones like carnelian, agate, and lapis lazuli were extracted and carried down into the valley. These materials fed a growing artisan class and helped fuel long-distance trade. Meanwhile, the forests and rivers supported diverse livelihoods. Hunting, fishing, and foraging provided food security and material goods, from hides and bones to reeds and timber. The civilization's connection to its natural environment was deeply practical, not just spiritual or symbolic. Every resource was used with precision and purpose, often in ways that showed a remarkable understanding of balance and sustainability. In the Indus Valley, nature didn't merely surround the people, it shaped their lives, their cities, and their future. But even the richest land depends on a delicate balance. And in the Indus Valley, that balance was written in the skies. Long ago, this region was more humid, more generous. Each year, monsoon winds swept in from the Indian Ocean, bringing life-giving rain to the fields, forests, and rivers. These rains flooded the Indus and its tributaries, not with chaos, but with nourishment. The floods deposited layers of fertile silt, rejuvenating the soil and ensuring thriving harvests year after year. This seasonal rhythm became the heartbeat of the civilization. People timed their planting, their building, and their rituals around the sky. The floods fed the land fed the people, and the people responded with remarkable adaptations. Elevated buildings, intricate drainage, and water storage systems built to work with nature, not against it. But over time, that rhythm began to break. The monsoons grew erratic. Rivers like the Geographic began to dry. What was once predictable became unreliable. Crops began to fail. Wells dropped lower. Villages slowly emptied. There were no great wars, no invaders sweeping through. Instead, there was a quiet unraveling, hidden in the soil and the skies. In the end, it may not have been an enemy that brought the Indus cities to their knees, but the absence of rain, and a slow, silent shift in the winds they once trusted. But before the skies grew uncertain, the land below had blossomed, and at the heart of it all was farming. The people of the Indus Valley were not just city builders. They were cultivators of life. From the earliest days, they learned to read the land and coax it into abundance. Fields of wheat and barley rippled in the monsoon breeze. Millet and cotton grew in carefully tended plots, fed by floodwaters and simple irrigation channels carved by hand. This wasn't industrial farming. It was farming in rhythm with the seasons. Crops were chosen not just for yield, but for resilience. And while the rivers gave water, it was human ingenuity that directed it. Early farmers dug canals, shaped embankments, and stored water in the stone-lined reservoirs, ensuring that even in dry spells, their crops had a fighting chance. Beside them, domesticated animals formed the backbone of agricultural life. Cattle pulled wooden plows through the earth. Goats and sheep provided milk, meat, and wool. Chickens clucked between mud brick pens. The farm was not just a place of food, it was a web of interdependence. Animals and people working side by side. Together, these early agricultural practices laid the groundwork for everything that followed: cities, trade, and culture. The roots of civilization, quite literally, began in the soil. And where there were fields, there were homes. Small clusters of life began to take shape. The earliest settlements of the Indus Valley, these weren't cities yet, but they were more than camps. Along riverbanks and fertile floodplains, communities chose their land wisely, always near water, and often along natural trade routes that would one day stretch to distant regions. Their homes began modestly, made of sun-dried mud bricks, simple and practical. Over time, as villages grew, these evolved into fired brick structures, more durable, more permanent, and carefully planned. Even in these early phases, there was structure. Homes stood in rows. Storage pits were dug to protect grain. Hearths were placed centrally for warmth and cooking. In larger villages, grain silos stood like silent sentinels, holding the harvest for future seasons. These weren't just homes, they were systems, and around them, life took root. Children playing, livestock grazing, artisans working with clay and stone. The sounds of a growing civilization echo quietly from these foundations. Though smaller than the grand cities to come, these early settlements reveal a people already thinking collectively, already laying bricks not just for shelter, but for society. In their simplicity, they carried the DNA of something far greater. The village was not the beginning of life, it was the beginning of civilization. And civilization, by nature, reaches outward. It listens, it trades, it learns, it connects. The Indus Valley was never isolated. From its earliest days, it was a crossroads, a living thread between diverse regions and peoples. To the west, it touched Balochistan. To the southeast, it traded with Gujarat. And to the north, its influence crept into the highlands of Afghanistan. Paths worn by feet and carts became the arteries of exchange, not just of goods, but of ideas. Symbols, etched onto pottery in distant lands, matched those found in Indus settlements. Tools and ornaments crafted in one region appear in another. A shared language of form and function seems to ripple across hundreds of miles. The quiet signature of cultural diffusion. There was no single empire, no conquering army. Instead, there was a rhythm of contact, mutual influence, not dominance. Artisans in faraway regions mimicked Indus beadwork. Stone weights found in Balochistan were carved to Indus standards. Terracotta figurines carried familiar forms. The spread wasn't forced, it was organic, the natural result of contact between neighbors with something to share. Even as the Indus cities were rising, they were also reaching, forming relationships that helped define the Greater Bronze Age world. This was not just a civilization of the Indus, it was a civilization in conversation with others, part of a much wider ancient dialogue. And then, for thousands of years, that conversation went silent, buried beneath dust, brick, and time, until the 1920s. As British engineers laid railway lines across Punjab, they began uncovering strange, uniform bricks that didn't match the known empires of India's past. What they found would rewrite the early history of South Asia. The ruins of Harappa and later Mohenjo-daro emerged from the soil like echoes. Vast cities built with grid layouts, drainage systems, and public infrastructure, crafted long before the rise of Rome or Egypt's Golden Age. These were not myth, they were fact, preserved in clay. And as excavations deepened, so did the story. Beneath the great cities lay older, earlier villages, smaller and simpler, the blueprints of urbanization itself. Artifacts found across sites helped connect the dots, weights and measures, identical pottery styles, and shared seals spread across thousands of kilometers. The diversity of the terrain, rivers, deserts, coasts, explained the diversity of the culture. The geography had shaped their unity. Even today, archaeologists are still digging, still brushing away the earth, still piecing together a civilization. Without kings, without conquests, yet with brilliance in every brick. It was once forgotten. Now, it rises again, not through conquest, but through discovery.